Yes, welcome in. Badgers are on their bye week, which means we're on our bye week as well. What do you got planned for the weekend, Jesse?
Big birthday party blowout for the kid. So
How old is he now?
4 years old. Time
Ooh,
goes fast.
getting up there, getting up there. Is he playing sports yet?
Getting him into soccer. Got some basketball action. I don't know if he's gonna be able to earn a scholarship if he's 5'9", but we'll work on it.
You can always have the D3 experience.
Hey, don't knock it till you've tried it, my man.
I didn't say I again was not knocking it. I think the D3 experience is the best kind of experience because you're playing for the love of the game. You're not getting anything back from it.
I'm getting my heart filled with opportunity and love. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I got you. I got you. All right, so that should be interesting. My big weekend, firing up all the TVs in here and just watching football all the weekend, which is going to be amazing, which you don't normally get to do on weekends during the college football season for obvious reasons. So, all right, let's get into this. We don't have any game to talk about this weekend. We don't have any interviews to talk about with players or Luke Fickell because none of that happened this week because it is a bye week. So we're going to get into more of big picture questions and state of the program questions because that's extremely fair to do 16 games into a tenure. And I know that that's probably going to upset some people that we're going to be making declarations off of 16 games. But again, the greatest thing about football is next week they could go out to USC and win, and all of a sudden everything is completely changed. And we talk about this team completely different. However, as we sit here at 2-1 in the 2024 season and coming off a 7-6 season a year ago, we're going to get into all that stuff. Before we do, as always, Home Field Apparel is the official apparel sponsor of the camp, the best vintage gear you can possibly get. I was just going up on their website, homefieldapparel.com, going through all the stuff that you could get from Wisconsin. This vintage Bucky's Coachy jacket that just released earlier this month, perfect for October weather. Could probably compare it with this retro corduroy hat that they got up on the website as well. Now you can always go back and get some of the stuff from their premium football boxes, their platinum boxes that they put out last month that has 3 new items that you can only get in those boxes. And it includes a hoodie, which again, probably going to be good for the October games or even the November games, and obviously into basketball season as well. Again, the best vintage apparel you can find on the for college athletics is Home Field. More information up on homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code Bucky24 for 15% off your first purchase. All right, Jesse, let's get into this, and we're gonna just start with an easy one here for you. One word to describe the Luke Fickell era at Wisconsin.
Uninspiring so far. There were a lot that came to mind. Underwhelming. I think when he got hired.
Just a second before you get into this, I said one word, and then you just went and took.
Uninspiring.
And
I said
then,
a
and
lot
then you
came to mind, but I chose uninspiring.
The reason I bring it up is because I chose underwhelming. But go ahead.
All right, uninspiring. And the reason that I use that word is I think we all know, if you're watching, if you're listening, the excitement level when he was hired was off the charts, was as excited as I had seen this fan base in a really long time because they had been hungry for something a little bit different. Luke comes in. He has this tremendous run of success at Cincinnati. They go to the college football playoff. And since we're 16 games in, we have not seen the Badgers take that so-called next step or really feel like they're moving the meter considerably. And again, that's not to say it won't happen, but since we're just evaluating on what we've seen, kind of hasn't capitalized on that momentum on the field. I think they've done a really good job in recruiting, obviously created excitement with the changes, with the transfer portal, but they're 9-7 in 16 games. And so uninspiring is the word that comes to mind.
Yeah, I think that one works. Underwhelming is the one that I was kind of thinking about, and I think it essentially is pretty much the same thing. When you come and hammer us with all these things that are going to be changing, all these things are great, and hyping it up, we buy into that. I think fans bought into it. We as media bought into it last year, and we're certainly, I, I hesitate to use the word problem, but probably some part of the problem last year, and expecting things to hit the ground running and be at such a high level right away, and maybe that was unrealistic. I think it's notable that they changed their way of going about promoting the program here in the last 9 months since things did not necessarily go, because they certainly were a part of that last year, and like thinking that all these things were going to be great right away, and they weren't. And so this offseason was a little bit different. You didn't have nearly the building up of expectations and the building up of hype that we saw last year, and I think for good reason. And we heard from multiple people that that was done intentionally, where they didn't want to set the bar so high. But unfortunately, because of what happened last year and the way that that was said and the way things were going, that people don't forget that. I think we did a much better job leading into this season of kind of being wait and see people and kind of show us before we're going to actually say that this is what you are. And I think it's still, despite all of that, it's still been a little underwhelming, because I don't know where you've seen progress. And if you don't see progress, well, then it remains underwhelming for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people would probably agree with those assessments. It's just a matter of what your perspective and your outlook is here, that you want to give this time. And certainly Luke is going to be afforded that time. They brought him here, made a significant financial investment. And this is just not, it takes a long time. It can take a long time to turn around a football program. Sometimes you come in and you strike immediately and it's magic. And sometimes there are issues that have kind of eroded the program to a point that you've got to do something different, and it's not just going to happen right away. And you're right, we are guilty of this as anybody. Thought year one was going to be a lot better than what it was, and it was based on all these things are new and they're bright and they're shiny, and this must mean better. And because of success at previous stops, it's instantly going to translate. And we've seen that's not how it works all the time.
It is not how it works at all. And here's the thing. I know that when we talked on Monday, we were talking about the idea of comparing what Fickell took over to what Barry Alvarez took over. And I thought it was a ridiculous comparison. That said, compared to where the other three coaches that took over, that have coached this team since Barry Alvarez left, Brett Bielema taking over in 2006, and Gary Anderson taking over in 2013, and Paul Chryst taking over in 2015, the program was in a much better spot in all three of those stops than it was when Luke took over. And obviously a much different environment in college football that Luke is taking over. So I don't mean to, when I said Monday that it was a ridiculous comparison, I don't know if I said it. I've said it since. It was a ridiculous comparison and just not fair whatsoever to compare what Barry Alvarez walked into and what he had to take over to what Luke Fickell did 2 years ago. But it was still a significant, I think, challenge, more than what the other three guys did. I think, would you agree with that?
Yes, I think the other three comparisons are more apt and more interesting, frankly, because Brett took over a program that had been humming right along. They won, what did they win? 12 games that first year?
Yes, 12-1.
And, when Gary took over, Brett left. The 2012 team wasn't great, 8-6, still hammered Nebraska, won a Big Ten championship. And obviously when Paul came in, they had come off a Big Ten championship game appearance that most people would like to forget, but that was probably the most challenging of the three, largely because just the way Gary was doing things was a little bit different. But when Luke is taking over here, they fired a coach in the middle of the season for the first time in the history of the program and needed to make some changes. And part of the reason that it's more challenging now than ever is the things we've discussed, the NIL, the transfer portal, that stuff didn't exist. And it just makes it so much harder. Plus, you're entering now into an 18-team conference that is exceptional. Just to even be in the top third, you have to be one of the best teams in the country. You could not say that before in the previous iteration of the Big Ten. You could be fifth and be okay. You can't be fifth now and just be okay.
Well, the previous iteration also had divisions, so
yes.
you could be the seventh best team, but if you're in the division that's not very good and you win it, I'm not saying that was ever Wisconsin. I'm not saying Wisconsin was seventh in the division. They were one of two teams, I think Iowa, the other one that was actually above 500 against the East Division. So it's not like that's not what I was saying, but you get my drift. Like last year or the year before, where perhaps the teams were not very good, still ended up getting to the championship game. Like Purdue playing in the championship game in 2022 is just it makes, I mean, that tells you all you need to know about the West Division on some of those years. But again, all right. So for you, is Wisconsin in a better position now than when Luke Fickell took the job in November of 2022?
I'd like to say yes, because of the clearly changes needed to be made, and it was going to take a while to at least get to whatever this point is. So it's hindsight is 2020, but like if you knew it was going to take at least a year and a half or multiple years, and it's very clearly becoming a multi-year process, you want to be closer to wherever that line is to get to that next level. So, I mean, some people may not agree with that because they say, like, look at the product. They went 7-6 in the first year, and it's the same record they had the year before. But very clearly, they needed to do some things different to put themselves even in a spot a couple years down the line to have a chance. So that's why I answer that way.
I'm sorry. Can I just get a clarification? What did you say? Did you say yes,
Yeah,
they are, or no, they aren't?
I think they're in a better position now, but it's because they've had to go through this year and a half, really almost 2 years now. But from an on-field results standpoint, they're not better. So like it's two different things. But I think all the things that are required behind the scenes to build an infrastructure, they had to get to whatever that next point was to give them a chance.
I think that's definitely where they have improved, right? Like it's some of the recruiting and the way that they're attacking it that way. The transfer portal, which was not as big of a thing, at that point in 2022, they're attacking it in a certain way. The strength and conditioning program, I think you could certainly say that they are a faster and more athletic team, even though it didn't look like it on Saturday against the type of athletes that Alabama has. You still have a ways to go to get to that spot. I think they are in a better spot there as well. And where I don't know if they're in a better spot is certainly on the field, but also, and maybe this is unfair. Are they a better coach team now than they were in 2022?
I think the jury's still out, frankly. Because you got to win games and you got to put the product on the field. If we're specifically talking about coaching, then it's the decisions you make, the play calling, the personnel, and it hasn't yielded better results. So the thing that contributes to this discussion is, and we've mentioned it, and I'm sure we'll continue to mention it, is what is the identity of the program and what does it look like on the field and what is it that this team does well and can so-called hang its hat on. And even Luke acknowledged when I asked him after the game against Alabama that they're still trying to figure out what that is. And so it's hard to say that they are better now in that area than they were before. You need talent. I feel like that 2022 team, they quit against Illinois, but it felt like, man, they gave everything they had for Jim Leonhard after the fact. And I think he did the best job that he could in a really difficult situation. So, the jury is still out in that category in my mind.
Have they hit rock bottom yet?
I feel like rock bottom was a couple years ago.
I'm not talking about a couple years ago. I'm talking about Luke Fickell, like things where, like, are they on an upward trajectory?
Like in the Luke Fickell tenure, have they hit rock bottom?
Yes. And what is it if they have? Was it Saturday?
No, I mean,
or was it the 2-game stretch where you lost to Indiana and Northwestern on back-to-back weeks?
That's where my mind goes right now, and certainly this season, it could go.
Season hasn't played out, right?
We're 3 games in the year. We haven't started Big Ten play. It could go a couple different directions. They could come back with some real fight, maybe a tailored game plan, and start winning a game or two that you don't expect. And they could also lose every game that you expect them to lose and more. So to this point, rock bottom to me was Northwestern, Indiana. Indiana was 2-21 in Big Ten play, and then Northwestern has a 3-touchdown lead at halftime, and fans are booing the team off the field. And Luke Fickell is saying after the game that is embarrassing. So that to me, to this point, very clearly is rock bottom. Yeah, losing by a significant margin at home to a top 5 team isn't ideal. It's the biggest loss they've had at Camp Randall in 16 years. But there is right now, I think it's last season.
What if we're sitting 2 weeks here, 2 weeks from now, having lost to a Purdue team that Wisconsin has not lost to since 2003? Would that be, and just got smacked 66-7 by Notre Dame?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. At least
they also have to play USC, which right now is ranked 11th, is playing a top 20 Michigan team on the road. That if USC wins that, you're going to the Coliseum to face an unbeaten top 10 team, and that stadium, like they announced recently, it's sold out. So certainly things could get worse this season. But look, if we're going to go into the season with a wait and see mode, let's wait and see how they respond off this bye week too.
I love how they say it's sold out, but like half the stadium isn't even used because it's like it's the former Olympic stadium. So like it like stops like whatever. It doesn't matter. Yes. But I think as I said before, I think the opportunity to go into USC, there's not a chance in hell I would ever pick them to actually win that game. But if they do, it kind of changes the narrative of what we're talking about. All the narratives coming out of the Alabama game and all the narratives through the first 16 games, quite a few of them are negative. And so I think the opportunity to go to USC is huge. What I was saying is if they lose to USC, then they come home. And again, I'm not trying to be negative, not trying to be that guy and talk about, all things are horrible and the world is horrible and the program is horrible and all. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying if they were to come back and lose to Purdue, a team they haven't lost to in more than 20 years, that might be rock bottom. But yeah, that's down the road.
Right. You're asking up to this point, and to me,
yes.
It's not this season, even though obviously what we've seen through 3 games isn't the product many people hoped. They're 2-1.
Again, the thing is, it's not about the Alabama game. It's about the 2 games previous to that, and not seeing the improvement that we thought we were going to see. Like that's for me where my issue stands with this group. It's not about the Alabama game. They had a few opportunities here and there, but they've just made way too many mistakes to even be considered to be in that game. If a few things goes their way, are they winning that game? Probably not, but they are at least closer than 42-10. I'm more talking about the 2 previous games where I don't know that we saw the jump that we thought we could potentially see. So I guess this is a in-season question. You can make one realistic change during the bye week. No firings. I know that that's just where people's minds go automatically, and that's why I didn't ask it on Twitter or X or whatever, or Instagram. What is it?
To me, I think it's figure out what you want to be offensively and stick to it. And I mean, based on what we've heard from both Luke and Phil Longo, I think they can meld these 2 things. I don't exactly know what that looks like, but very clearly Luke wants to, and he's talked about this through the first 2 weeks, certainly, that they wanted to establish this physical identity. And when he was talking about, because I asked, what is it that you think you do well? He went right to that he feels like they can run the ball, that they've got an offensive line that can help them do that. And at the same time, Phil's he wants to run the ball. 50-50 split is kind of what I expected with him coming here, but we just haven't seen those types of big plays. So I don't know exactly how you meld that, but I think that's where it's got to start, is figure out what is it that you want to be and stick to it. And it's going to look different with Braden Locke moving forward. Obviously, Tyler Van Dyke is out for the season, tore his ACL. And so this is Locke's team for the rest of this season. They've talked before about that maybe an advantage that he can have is doing things a little bit more up tempo. That's something Braden said after the Alabama game, that he said, if you look at what our best drives were, and granted, there weren't a ton of them against Alabama, he felt like they were getting the plays in quickly and they were moving the ball. And so some combination of those 2 things, that's where it's got to start.
It's kind of funny. It was still a 17-play drive that they scored on. So
Mhm.
got the plays in, great. Still lacking the explosives. The thing is that there were a couple explosive opportunities that he missed on. And I know Will Pauling blamed the sun, but come on now. Like, that he didn't stop running, and you could tell that he was running as hard as he could to try and catch that ball. It just did not happen. But good on him. Good on him for protecting his quarterback. The Tretch one is probably also more on the quarterback, though. Again, it wouldn't have counted because Joe Brunner got called for being illegally downfield on the play. So even if he caught it, but at least you could see that it worked. See that they have the ability to make some of those plays. For me, it's about getting the ball somehow, some way, figuring out a way to get your playmakers the ball, and that includes Tretch. And I know that there are some that have maybe criticized some of his route running, and that is, I think, is probably completely accurate and fine to do. Then put him in the backfield and get the ball in his hands in the backfield, whether it's jet sweeps or having him line up to that. We saw that in spring a little bit. We saw one play where he got to line up in the backfield, or maybe that was Will Pauling. Either way, they're the same guy. They can both do that out of the backfield. And also, the young tailbacks. If you're not going to get explosive plays out of Ches Malusi, even though he ran hard and actually averaged close to 8 yards a carry or something like that. It was ridiculous. Unfortunately, on his longest carry, he fumbled. So I find the way to get the ball in your hands of your playmakers that can make those big plays, even if maybe they don't have everything down exactly as you want it. Play the guys that have a chance to be special when they touch the ball. I think that is maybe too simplified, but we saw this, and I know it's completely different because it's the NFL and they have the ability to, really just dive in and change things on the fly. They've got smart guys and they've got guys that are getting paid to do it. But what the Packers did on Sunday against Indianapolis with the run game and all the different things that they did to cover up for maybe some limitations at quarterback. Could the Badgers do the same thing? I'm not expecting it, but figure out a way to they got the ball in Jaden Reed's hands. They got the ball in Josh Jacobs' hands. They got the ball before he went down Marshawn Lloyd's hands in just a bunch of different ways. And that's what I think Wisconsin should or could or needs to do, because what we've seen offensively is just not going to do it. And also, Phil Longo, run the offense you want to run.
Yeah, there's that too.
Run the offense that you want to run.
Yeah, go out swinging. I mean, it's interesting because. Go ahead.
No, go for it. I would agree. I was agreeing with that.
Everybody can't get the ball as much as they want to get the ball, but I'm just sitting here looking at the numbers of the so-called playmakers. Tretch is averaging, and this is off the top of my head, 14 yards receiving per game, and Bryson Green, who, if there is a guy that hypothetically you could at least throw a 50-50 ball down the field. He had one catch against Alabama, 3 targets. I'm not sure he was targeted in the second half. I understand they went through a massive shift they weren't expecting by having to go to a backup quarterback. And even CJ Williams, he had that great 50-yard touchdown catch, which was not thrown 50 yards, but it was just a great play call by Longo. He's got one other catch the entire season for 3 yards. So they're just, where are the big plays? If you've got guys you feel comfortable that you can even try it, it doesn't even seem like they're doing that a ton. And so I agree. You've got to at least try it. I mean, it's one thing if you feel like you don't have the players, but it's another thing. And Phil talked about this. What did we say last week when he was discussing this? We went and we recruited players because we'd put up numbers at previous stops, and we want that to continue that at Wisconsin. Well, if you went and recruited those kinds of guys, then you want to give them more of those opportunities. And I do think that's part of the challenge in all of this is if you want to be more physical, you want to have 2 tight end personnel 30% of the time through the first 2 games, run the ball, be physical on the offensive line. I don't know. Is there more of a power spread out there? Is there a different outlook? But I do know what we've seen is it does not really resemble, I think, what Longo did at the other places to have a ton of success.
Now, what's actually going to happen? I feel like they're going to get even more conservative. I feel like they're going to probably try and limit possessions even more so and run the ball even more. And that's kind of where because I think that's probably the way that they think they can win, that they maybe don't believe that they have the offense to compete when it's a high scoring game. They want to be a physical team. They want to pound people. And maybe that is who they want to be. The problem, here's the problem, is if they do change, we're all going to be liking it, but it's also them not being able to find an identity either. It's them not sticking with who they think they should be and caving to pressure from outside people or even inside people that they need to do it this way. So changing your identity mid-season of what you want to be. I don't think that they've proven that they can be that, but who they want to be, changing that mid-season would be a good thing, but it'd also be maybe an indictment of kind of where they're at.
How much of that do you think is to protect Braden Locke? And do you think it would be different if Tyler was healthy? Or do you think what we saw through 2 games plus 1 drive it would be similar?
Well, we were talking when we were up there. There was, and I don't know what the numbers ended up actually being before Tyler went out, but we didn't see any 12 personnel. We didn't see any of the 2 running back sets on that first drive. I wonder if it would have stayed that way. That the idea that they were kind of practicing what they needed to be in those first 2 games at certain times and just trying to get that under their belt, and then you were going to see a little bit more spread and throw the ball down the field type of stuff. Could that have been the case on Saturday? It's one of those things that we'll never know. But it also kind of leads to the question, how can they show improvement without Tyler Van Dyke? Like, what does improvement look like for this offense without their starting quarterback for a second straight year, which builds in an excuse that everyone says they're not going to use as an excuse, but then, of course, will use as an excuse.
What does improvement look like with this offense moving forward and Braden Locke? Well, it's hard to put a number on that or a number of touchdown drives. Like, he's completed 50% of his passes in his career. You can't win that way. I mean, maybe you can if you've got the running backs and you're just going to run for 240 yards or something like that. So far, we've not seen it that way. And the other thing is, I don't think, look, they're not going to take the ball out of Braden's hands. This is not old school Wisconsin where he's going to pass it 8 times and you're going to run it 50 times. They're still going to do the things Phil Longo wants to do, even if it's in a different way, even if it's shorter throws, quicker throws to try and get Braden in a rhythm. I think even of last year where he was throwing the ball 30 plus times a game and he was making his first career starts. I don't know if he's going to throw 30 plus, but he darn well might. So
Van Dyke did the first 2 weeks.
So I think it's still going to be a mix of those 2 things. They're not going to fully commit and just divert away from passing the ball at all. So you got to figure out a way to have him complete passes at a higher rate. And you're right. Maybe it does mean being more conservative. But it's success. It's when you get into the red zone, can you convert some touchdowns? Can you move the ball efficiently? I think the running backs need to step up in a different way from what we've seen. And I think they've run the ball hard, but we haven't seen a ton of game-changing plays out of them. So, I mean, to me, this is up to the offensive line, the running backs, and the staff to put Braden in a position to be more successful and more efficient.
A lot of people have been wondering and asking, and, the season's over. Why not just play Mabry? Let's just see what Mabry's got. And this kind of goes back to the idea of like what's going to change and how they're going to try and figure this out. The coaches are coaching for their job every single year. Like, even though Luke Fickell's not going anywhere, like, the guys around him are not going to play guys that are going to potentially lead to them not having a job next year. And so that's not a shot at Mabry. That's just saying right now Braden Locke is a better option. And when people hear that, they're like, yikes, but Mabry's a freshman. I don't know that you can just expect him to come in and just be that guy. And I know that freshmen in other parts of the country are playing. These guys are really, really good players. Ryle at Nebraska is a really, really good player. Shadir Sanders, when he was at Jackson State as a freshman, really, really good players. You don't want to just throw a guy in if he's not ready. And I don't think Mabry's ready. So based on the last time we saw him, I don't think he's ready. Yeah, so you're not going to throw him in.
I answered this question for a mailbag that's running on Friday. And I mean, look, we saw every practice. The last open practice we had a chance to see was a month ago. It feels like a year ago because sometimes things, the way the season has played out so far, that's just how it's felt. But I felt this even in the preseason. Clear delineation between where Tyler Van Dyke and Braden Locke were and the rest of the quarterbacks, and that is completely understandable. A true freshman, it takes a long time to grasp the offense, to adjust to the speed, to play at this level. Backup quarterback is always the favorite option, and we get this every year if things aren't going well. Why not just play the young guys now, play for the future? You're right. That's not how, like, there is a balance to strike. I think of it running back, Darian Dupree, Dylan Jones. You want to get those guys opportunities because you know they're ready, they're good enough, and you want to show them the path forward. It's different right now at quarterback. Maybe did some good things in the preseason. I thought there were moments, especially with his ability to sell some play fakes and get some yardage with his legs, was impressive. And there's also a moment I'm thinking of in a scrimmage where he just stared down a defensive back, essentially. Like, it went to his first option. It was a wide receiver in the corner, and was picked off and went for 6 the other way. It's rookie mistakes. It's understandable. And he's also doing that against a third team defense. And you can make the case of, well, but he'd be with the first team offense. He'd be going against the first team defense of some of the top defenses in the country. There is a reason in my mind why there hasn't been a true freshman quarterback at Wisconsin that has started a game since Jay Macias in 1991. It is really hard. And so I don't think that's the path forward for this season. Maybe there's a situation later on where you're getting late in the game and the stakes are much lower and you want to get him some reps because that matters. But I just don't think it's good for this program, for him, for this team, for the staff to throw him into a situation where it's not the best chance to give this team, like, this team doesn't have the best chance to win. And you don't want to ruin someone's confidence or mess with it when he's not ready for that moment.
Random question before we move on to overreaction or no. Do you think Tyler Van Dyke is back next year?
Ooh, tough one. I want to say yes. So first of all, we don't know.
I think it depends. Just before you get into this, I think it depends who the offensive coordinator is.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
There's so many factors to this that it's impossible to know right now. What does the recovery timetable look like? Torn ACL. I mean, look, everybody responds differently. We've seen guys, they come back and 9 months later, they're look like the guy they did before. Sometimes it can take longer. And are you even the same player? If one of your skill sets is a little bit more mobility, is that gone? Do you trust yourself? So there's the recovery aspect to it. I do think, though, yes, he's got another year of eligibility now. Says if he misses this season, then this counts as the medical redshirt year, since 2020 at the time was a redshirt year, would now be the COVID year.
Why are we calling it a medical redshirt?
Well,
it's a redshirt.
Well, because initially the redshirt, however you want to say it, semantics.
It is, but I like medical redshirt. You have to apply for.
Okay, well, it's a red shirt due to medical purposes. I feel like we're getting into semantics here. Like,
you are, but it was a little bit of an annoying argument that potentially was being had in the press box on Sunday, and but it's relevant. He's got another year.
He's got a fallback. So he's got to have somewhere to go for next season, and it would seem like this is, as it's currently constructed, the best spot for him. He won the starting job for a reason, and if he comes back and is healthy and the staff is the same, then why wouldn't he be the starter next year? But you're right. It depends on who's calling the plays, because Longo's the one that went and got him, and obviously they had respect for each other dating back to their ACC days. So as it's currently constructed now, yeah, I think he would be back, certainly.
Would you want him back?
I would. Okay. I think that, so I'm sure we'll get into this. Like, that's part of the challenge here too, is the staff has talked about wanting to develop players across the board, and tough to do that when you bring in a guy who's only here for 1 year. On the other hand, you want to win now. And if he gives you the best option to win, then I think that you would want him. I mean, let's just think about their quarterback situation right now. I mean, Braden Locke is the only guy who's healthy right now that has playing experience. Then you have Mabry. We just talked about him. Could be the future. Not ready yet. Cole LaCrue. And you're bringing in Landon Locke, who tore his ACL earlier this season. So why wouldn't you want Tyler Van Dyke in that situation?
Well, I guess in that situation, we'll see if Braden's like. I mean, this is kind of Braden's opportunity to show that he deserves the job,
Yeah.
and if he doesn't play well or if he gets replaced, I can't imagine him being here next year. So like that's a part of it. And then you wonder if Landon will be here just because family, whatever. I think, if I'm Wisconsin, I certainly have to look at the transfer portal and see if there's somebody that you think is a better option than Tyler Van Dyke. I think that would be the only. You just have to do it. I'm sorry. you just do. Like, we're in that era where you have to try and better your team every opportunity you get. If there's somebody in the transfer portal that they think is better than Tyler Van Dyke, you go out and get him and you bring him in. So like that is where I'm thinking maybe why Tyler would not be here, is just because they may try and add from somewhere else, and it might be a guy that's proven, and he comes in and he's going to be the starter. So I guess we'll see. 9 to 12 months, right? Like, that's kind of the where the ACL usually is, and he did it on September 14th. So it's possible that he's back and ready to go by fall camp next year, but you don't know. Obviously, going to miss the spring, and that is going to be. I'm very interested to see what that spring looks like and like who is actually back playing quarterback. But they still have another 9 games to go this year. Plenty to change potentially before we get to that. Yeah. So, all right. A little overreaction or no, Jesse. These are actual comments from the questions that I asked for after the game on Saturday. This is some of the ones that I didn't get to when we did the ones, but these are more statements than anything else. Is this an overreaction or no? I just think Wisconsin isn't equipped to compete in the modern landscape, and it's tough to be invested about a team in that situation. The game felt like a funeral. Is that an overreaction or no?
I think that's an overreaction at this stage. And we're still learning about what the modern landscape looks like with NIL and Ohio State having $20 million to invest in a football program. That's not going to be Wisconsin. But I mean, Wisconsin wasn't at that level previously and yet still did some really good things. I have gotten this question in recent weeks as well. Like, what is Wisconsin's place in where things are headed in college football? And can they even be in that so-called next tier? I believe they can. Certainly, it's not like this is a Division III school that has no players that can line up and compete. Like, they can still go and get guys. They can still win recruiting battles, not all of them, but against some of the top tier teams. But it's going to take that certain special type of season, kind of like what it took previously to put yourself in a position to be there. So you got to get players, you got to get impact playmakers from the portal, you got to develop your freshmen. That's a really big thing, and I think it's harder than ever now in this NIL era. Is can you keep them? It would help to have a quarterback that's going to be a difference maker too. Look at some of these teams. Look at Dylan Raiola at Nebraska. Nebraska has been irrelevant for a long time. They went and got a 5-star legacy, and now all of a sudden they're 3-0 and look like a completely different program. So it's an overreaction, but it's going to take some work.
Do you think apathy is a potential concern for this program?
Yes, I think that's always a concern. And that is the worst place that you want to be, because when you're apathetic, obviously, I mean, you don't care. And from a financial perspective, who's going to be willing to donate their hard-earned money or go to the games, all the things necessary to kind of keep the train rolling. So we're not there yet. But right now, I think it's frustration, anger, and then what's worse than that is obviously things turn apathetic, which is I don't think Wisconsin has been there since the late 80s. But that doesn't mean you can't get there again.
And I don't think it's just how the team's performing either, though. I think it's the nature of college football and how it's changed and how it's tough to be invested because guys are here one day and gone the next and like that type of stuff. I think that contributes to it along with the way that your team plays. However, if you win games, no matter what the rest of college football is like, if you're winning games and you're beating Alabama and you're beating USC, people are not going to be apathetic about it. I guarantee you they will not be. So I think winning cures all of that.
Well, think about what Tennessee just did with a essentially 10% talent fee, where they're charging more money for fans to invest in the team. And you can sell that when you're 3-0, you're scoring 60 points a game. So obviously the success on the field contributes to a willingness from the fan base to invest financially and just be more invested overall.
Is this an overreaction or no? Skilled players are going to get sick of this offense and transfer out. High school players will decommit after Longo's offense looks like shit. Is that an overreaction or no?
Ooh, I think that's an overreaction right now, but I mean, I don't want to let's be real about it. If you were not there, but if you move on from a coach that has recruited you to a particular style, it's easier now than ever to leave. On the other hand, you can sell, as you can always sell, opportunity for the next guy. This is still a Big Ten program. This is still a team with a lot of tradition. And this is still a program that I think can win at a fairly high level. So I don't know that you're going to see a complete mass exodus, but this is also the nature of where we are in college football in general, that you're going to have significant roster turnover every year, and you're going to have more of that if you've got staff changes.
Overreaction or no, Wisconsin is the new Nebraska.
Overreaction now. We're still early in this process, and it's another question that I've got. That was kind of a multi-decade dive into the abyss, although I realized there were some good moments. Their situation is interesting and a little bit different just because like their standard was higher than what Wisconsin ever got to. Under Tom Osborne, his last 4 years, they won 3 national championships. They bring in Frank Solich. They fire him. He had a team that finished like number 2 in the country. He had a really good record there. Then they bring in Bill Callahan, and he's not very good. Then they bring in Bo Pelini, and he wins 9 or 10 games every year he's there for 6 full seasons, and they get rid of him. And then they had this little dive where they went 8 years and had 1 winning season. So like, it's a different situation, but I understand the comparison right now.
I think the comparison is about identity, maybe more so than anything, right? Because of what Tom Osborne was and what Frank Solich continued to be, and then bringing in Bill Callahan and completely changing who Nebraska was. I think that is probably maybe where the comparison is more so than struggling record-wise.
Yeah, well, it's yes. I mean, I'm not willing to say that yet. We're not deep enough into this tenure, but obviously this is a recurring topic. I mean, we were asking Luke, we're talking about this frequently about, okay, well, what is the identity? What can you hang your hat on? What does this program do well? And it's just not the things that this program once did well or that it could once rely on. And so if that continues, then it's understandable why it feels kind of like a Nebraska situation.
Is this an overreaction? No. Wisconsin's going to be favored to maybe 1 or 2 games the rest of the way, probably end up 4-8 or 5-7. Is that an overreaction or no?
Doesn't feel like a massive overreaction right now. I said they'd go 7-5 before the season, expecting them to lose the 5 games against ranked opponents. And now I was not ranked, but Nebraska's ranked. And so I was not a cakewalk. Yeah, I don't know how many games on the schedule left you can say Wisconsin's going to be favored. That doesn't necessarily matter when you get to kickoff, but it's going to be a slog for sure. I mean, I think people are thinking, well, best case scenario, it's 6-6. Hey, they're going to have to show us they can be better than that. And right now, we don't have enough evidence that leads us to believe they are.
As we sit here right now, September 19th, which games would you pick Wisconsin to win?
Purdue at home. Yes.
Minnesota, maybe?
Yeah. They've got 4 ranked opponents left. The Rutgers game is, I don't, perhaps, but Rutgers, and they've got a huge opportunity. They're going to go play Virginia Tech. Kyle Mungai is one of the best running backs in the country. If they go win that game, it's hard to say Wisconsin is going to go win that game in Piscataway. So there's really only a couple that you can say you feel decent about. That doesn't mean they can't win a handful of others. But again, it goes back to, like, have you done enough at this point to show that people should believe in you?
Yeah. What was the one more? Oh, the loss of Tyler Van Dyke is a blessing in disguise because they get to see if Locke is the future or whether they have to look elsewhere. Is that an overreaction or no?
I don't think that's an overreaction. I mean, blessing in disguise may not be the
terminology
the way that I would put it. But it does give you an opportunity to see what can he be the future. He's a redshirt sophomore. He'll have 2 years after this. He's got 9 games to be the starter. A little bit different, obviously, from last year where Mordecai was coming back. You didn't necessarily know. It was quicker than I think a lot of us thought. But then Braden got 3 starts. By the end of this season, he will have started 12 games, and that's a full regular season, a full enough sample size to know what you have, even if the circumstances are difficult. And if he performs well, then you can feel much better, I think, about having him potentially be the guy for 2 more years. I know that Phil said this in the preseason, and you know, you don't want to say anything negative about a guy that you're potentially going to need, but he did say we felt like if we had to go with Braden right now to be our starter, we would feel good about that. So let's find out. Let's find out how good you feel in these 9 games.
All right, let's get into our week 4 picks. No Badger game, obviously, to pick today, but we have 7 others. And through 3 weeks, Jesse is 13-8. Good job, buddy. You went 4-3 this past weekend. I also went 4-3, so I'm 10-11. But let's start with a big one on Friday night. Illinois, ranked 24th in the country, going to 22nd ranked Nebraska. Nebraska is a 7.5-point favorite in that game. I would say Nebraska's first real test. I don't think Colorado was very good, so Nebraska's first real test.
7.5, even at home, feels massive to me against an Illinois team that has been pretty darn good. Beat Kansas. Luke Altmaier hasn't thrown an interception yet, so even if Illinois doesn't go down there and win, I think they're going to keep it within 1 possession. So I'm going to go Illinois on this one.
I wonder when's the last time Nebraska played a ranked versus ranked team at home. It's probably been quite a bit. Maybe 2016 when they were the last time they made a bowl game and they came to Wisconsin ranked 7th. But probably hasn't happened too often. A Friday night game, that place is going to be an absolute madhouse. So while 7.5 is a big number, I think Illinois may be just a tad overrated. We saw Kansas is maybe not as good as we thought they were when Illinois beat them. So I'm going to take Nebraska at home. All right, USC at Michigan. USC ranked 11th. They're 5.5-point favorites going to the Big House.
You know, Michigan's not been very good, and they just made a quarterback change. I do wonder, though, whether that change is going to ignite something. Kind of felt like, and I've been reading about it from our Michigan writer, they really liked him. And then I don't know if they got cold feet, but the competition went longer than it should have, and they went with the veteran, and that was a huge mistake. So I kind of feel like he's going to spark them, and even if they don't win, I'm picking Michigan to cover.
This is the huge test for USC, right? Like, this is a test to prove that they are who they've looked like these first 3 games. And I know they already beat LSU. I get that. But going on the road, Big Ten opener, and facing a Michigan team that's got something to prove, I just don't know if Michigan has enough offensively against this group. And I think what we've seen from USC is pretty impressive. So I'm going to take USC on the road. Another top 25 matchup, Utah taking on Oklahoma State, battle of Big 12 powers. Oklahoma State is a 2.5-point favorite in that one.
I'm going to pick Oklahoma State to cover in this one. I think Bowman's throwing for like 320 plus yards a game. They still have Ollie Gordon the second. So it's a big game for both programs, obviously, but Cowboys cover.
Cam Rising returns this week. He was dinged up. Apparently going to be good to go. I'm going to take Utah on the road. Rutgers at Virginia Tech. You mentioned this one earlier. Virginia Tech, 3.5-point favorites.
Oh, man. This is a real moment for Rutgers. And where are you at as a program? I'm waffling on this one, but I think I'll go with Rutgers to cover.
I like Rutgers as well. I think it's a tough team. And you're right. They have one of the better running backs in the country. So, yeah, I'm going to go with that as well. Northwestern at Washington. And the Huskies, 10.5-point favorites in that one.
Big number.
Huge number.
Northwestern, I feel like defensively they'll figure out a way to stay close. I don't know that they've got enough offense. I know they made a quarterback change in their last game, and he put up big numbers. They've still got 2 touchdown passes the whole season. I think Washington's going to roll in this one, so I'll pick the Huskies.
I'm going to go with the Huskies as well. It's a night game, 6 o'clock start, coming off a really, really tough loss to a rival, right? In the way that they lost to Washington State on the goal line like that. I'm going to go Washington. Iowa traveling to Minnesota. Is it Floyd or Rosedale? Is that what the trophy they play for? Iowa's a 2.5-point favorite.
You're going to love this pick. I think I'm going to go Minnesota on this one. Obviously, they stunk against UNC. Competition hasn't been great. They've got back-to-back shutouts. And now I have questions about Iowa. The offense was back after week 1. Then they lose to Iowa State. Then they're in the dogfight against Troy. I don't know what that means. They've got one of the best running backs in the Big Ten, but I think Minnesota's going to cover.
I think Minnesota covers as well. Tennessee at Oklahoma, huge matchup of SEC teams. Tennessee rolls in there as the 6th-ranked team in the country, 7-point favorites at Oklahoma.
Man, is there any team that's looked more impressive through 3 games than Tennessee? Beat NC State, which was a ranked team, put up 51 there. They have 69 in another, 71 in another. It's absurd. On the other hand, I think Oklahoma is a different beast, and with a full touchdown to work with, I think the Sooners cover.
I think Oklahoma covers as well, but you're right about Tennessee. But it was 38-0 at the end of the first quarter this past weekend. They probably could have hung, I think it was Kent State, could have hung 200 on them, 150, 200, something like that, if they wanted to. So, yes, hilarious. Those are all the games. But wanted to ask you this question. Wake Forest, after getting hammered by Ole Miss, begged out of the return game. They said, we're not coming next year. And just not gonna play. Would you be okay with Wisconsin doing that? I know you want to go to Alabama, but would you be okay with Wisconsin doing that?
Nah, man, that's mad weak stuff.
I think that's it is the weakest thing you could possibly do. Grow a pair. It's just one game.
You're waving a white flag on what your program stands for. Do you even want to field an FBS team?
It's pathetic. They should be busted down to Division III or something like that. It's weak. It's very, very weak. I get it from we don't want to get embarrassed situation, but give me a break, dude. You're a Division I program in a major conference, and I don't want to. I don't want to. Ridiculous. All right. Hey, Jesse, really appreciate your time as always, and I hope you have a great weekend and happy birthday to your little guy, and hope you have a good time.
All right, man. Talk soon.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.